Think of the world around you. What do you see? What do you hear? Chances are, it's art. Art is everywhere. We see it in many different forms, such as drawings, sculptures, music, and even films. Heck, everything you see and hear around you is a piece of art. Art is at the root of human expression. It brings beauty to the world. It educates curious minds. It heals broken souls. And it even has the power to transform communities. Simply, art is transcendent. In the summer of 2020, a Tennessee public art program launched their month-long art initiative with one goal in mind: to transform rural communities with just a coat of paint. With multiple cities planned and diverse artists recruited, the initiative was underway. Over the course of a month, muralists were given full freedom to create a unique piece of art in these towns. The catch? These walls were for women.
My name is Kristen Luna. I am the co-founder and the president of DMA-Events, which is a public art nonprofit that installs murals and other projects in rural Tennessee. I have been a career journalist for more than 20 years. I've been working as a reporter and a features writer. So when I was 3 years old, growing up in Tullahoma, I wrote my first book. It was about Disney princesses, and I've been writing ever since then. I know that sounds crazy because most 3-year-olds are barely talking, but I've always been really interested in writing. I did some local work for the Tullahoma News back when I was still a teen. And then I went on to study different forms of writing at Sewanee, the University of the South. And then I wound up graduating with a journalism and electronic media degree from Knoxville. From there, I moved to New York for a job at Newsweek, and I jumped around publishing companies like most writers do. Worked at Entertainment Weekly, at Condé Nast. I was a red carpet reporter for several different magazines like In Style, People Magazine, Glamour. I was an editor or a researcher at a fashion magazine in New York. I was a little bit bored with my day job, and I started a blog called Camels and Chocolate, which is symbolic of being a bit of a nomad. You know, camel's kind of an ultimate sign of traveling, and then chocolate being an indulgence and a passion of mine. Blogging was just kind of coming up then, and so I decided to start a blog where I could write about whatever I wanted to write about, which was travel, different cultures, food. So the blog started as primarily a travel blog, but it's evolved into a creative outlet where I talk about what different communities are doing to thrive. A couple years ago, my husband and I decided to start a nonprofit that focused on bringing public art to the area that we live in. I kind of took that passion for entertainment and it morphed into more of an interest in public art and how that was transforming communities across the US. And so a lot of my writing these days has to do with livability in different cities and what city governments are doing to encourage growth and economic development. But I write about a lot of different things and through a different lens when it comes to tourism and food and entrepreneurs. I just have a curiosity for a lot of things, so journalism allows me to tap into that.
Kristen has worked with a variety of topics and projects throughout her career, but recently, public art has become her primary focus and her most ambitious one yet.
In March 2019, I was working on a research project for the tourism department for the state of Tennessee. The research project was to really dig in and find all these women who were considered leaders and trailblazers in their industry. It was to promote the centennial of the 19th Amendment in 2020, and it gave me enough time to really think about how Tennessee has this place in history in ratifying the 19th Amendment. And so in just researching these women and then writing just the briefest of snippets about what the ratification of that amendment meant, I went to Scott and I said, I think that it would be really cool to do something that honored this through DMA.
I thought it was a killer idea, so we just worked on it over the wintertime, and it sort of took on a life of its own after that.
It gave us about 18 months to really think it through, what that could be, and we started looking at it. We're like, well, this could be a paint day, but that'd be hard. Murals don't just take a day, so maybe it's paint week. And then that paint day evolved into a paint month, where we're now doing about 10 murals and working with artists from several different states to create original art throughout Tennessee. We decided to open up the project to anyone in Tennessee who wanted to be a part of it, and that's how the multiple cities came about. Who knows, maybe eventually we'll expand into other states as well, but we're definitely setting our nonprofit up to where we can kind of emulate this model in other small towns throughout the South or the country.
I guess the principle was to hire women only.
It's more talking about how women are not equal to men when it comes to the arts. 9 times out of 10, when you see street art, it's created by men, and it's not because there aren't amazing female muralists out there. It's just because, many different careers, men have a leg up and men are hired first.
That is something that I think women in particular get pushed back on more than men would.
So we wanted to give women a chance to leave their own mark on history, but also to express what the concept of being a woman means to them. One of our founding principles is that we allow artists to create what's in their mind, so we didn't want to dictate what they painted.
We're hiring artists because they're artists, not because we want to influence their art.
Some of these muralists have wanted to paint for a while and have never been given the opportunity, but I wish that we would allow creatives the space to create. Seems obvious, but for whatever reason, it's not. Walls for Women is a celebration of women, first and foremost. It's a celebration of creativity, and it's a celebration of equality.
Not only is Walls for Women providing female artists with the opportunity to have full creative freedom, but the project was also inspired by an important time in history, the 1920s. The 20s were brash and exuberant, and it was known as a time for social and political change. But there's one defining moment that changed the course of American history, and that was the rise of the women's suffrage movement.
I'm Wanda Sobieski. I'm the founder and president of the Suffrage Coalition, and I'm a lawyer. It seems like the notion that the United States was a democracy for the first 144 years of it, when women had no vote, is hypocrisy. Honestly, when I was a kid, I read the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and all the lofty language on the principles, and I thought those terms were generic. When they spoke of men, they meant men and women. Until I got in high school and I had a history book that said one sentence about suffrage. It said, in 1920, Congress gave women the right to vote. And I thought, what, they didn't have it before? And I mean, it was almost like a polite afterthought. And so that was sort of startling to me. And then when I started looking at what it took, 72 years, that's more than 7 decades of countless hours and dedication of time and money and effort. Persistence through a civil war and a world war and a pandemic of 1918, just to get the right to vote, the most basic right in a democracy. And I just felt like if more people understood what it took to get that right, then maybe they would take a little time to look at the candidates and take a little time to make sure that they always pass their vote.
The 19th Amendment was important to American women because it was a show that maybe someday we would be considered equal to our male counterparts, and that it gave women the confidence to want more in life.
The reaction of the country was ridicule. It was such an outrageous thing. These women had to convince men to vote for suffrage. So they spent a lot of time early on making logical arguments, trying to explain to people why it made sense. And so the suffragists in the early 1900s had parades and rallies and public events to draw attention to the fact that women couldn't vote and they wanted to be able to vote.
It's a lot more nuanced than just saying the 19th Amendment changed everything for women, but I think it just kind of opened the door for us to want more and to start fighting for our rights.
The 19th Amendment paved the way for women in America, but there's one man who impacted their journey, Harry Byrne. Harry Byrne was a Tennessee state representative and the youngest elected member of the legislature. When Tennessee was called into session to vote for women's suffrage, Byrne was involved and played a significant role in the ratification.
Tennessee was crucial because we finally got our act together and decided to be the 36th state to ratify the amendment, but it almost didn't go that way. It was because of this man named Harry Byrne.
He personally thought that it made sense, it was fair to give women the right to vote, but he was a representative. Throughout most of that battle, Harry wore a red rose, the symbol of the anti-suffragists, because that's what he thought his constituents wanted. And that's how he had decided that he would vote. But he didn't want to be the one that defeated suffrage. So he was a little conflicted.
That kind of set off Harry's mother. She decided to write him a letter, and that letter she tucked in his pocket that morning before he left.
Hurrah and vote for suffrage. And don't keep them in doubt. Don't forget to be a good boy. With lots of love, Mama.
When the vote was called, the vote to table was a dead tie because they were absolutely dead tie split for suffrage and against suffrage. He got called on the roll call vote. He stood up with his red rose on, and he pulled a letter out of his coat pocket from his mother.
And he ripped out the red rose from his lapel
and switched his vote and broke the tie and made suffrage a reality for 27 million women.
I mean, that's tough being a young man in a state like Tennessee to stand up for what your mom says is right, but it's actually his mom who kind of was the one who changed the course of history, because had she not written that letter, I mean, who knows when we would have gotten the right to vote.
And so he said that I've always found it best to follow my mother's advice. So he had gotten just that extra little push that made the difference.
It's a nice color. It's gonna be sweet.
process of creating a mural is so much longer than people would ever expect, because you see a muralist out there painting maybe a day, a weekend, a week, and you think, oh, that was really quick. But the behind the scenes is so much more time intensive than that. Several of the cities we're painting in currently don't have any murals, so we will be their first one. And so people get scared of the unknown, and that's something that we've learned we have to kind of be conscious of. We need to make the process as easy as possible while also educating them, because public art does fall under the First Amendment, freedom of expression, freedom of speech. And it was so important to our founding fathers that they put it in the very First Amendment. Not the 14th, not the 27th, the First Amendment. Some towns have tried to prevent building owners from exercising those First Amendment rights, and so it's been an education process on you can't actually do that. There's a way for us all to work together to achieve the same goals, which is improving the community, providing access to the arts.
Just the fact that you can do original art on a building in your community and it's not going to ruin the town, like that's a great place to start. And it's really bold and like crazy to say it, but a little bit of paint on a wall can absolutely alter the environment.
Scott and I go in and we fix up the building first, typically paint the entire thing, if not just the wall that we're painting on.
We really like to get the wall like perfect, and that way they have a brand new fresh canvas to go on there. So it's usually just scraping and cleaning, priming it, and then a fresh coat of base coat.
So they're not actually paying a penny, and we're coming in and improving their building, putting up art that's going to drive attention and exposure to them. So a lot of the beginning process revolves around meeting with historic zoning commissions or board of mayor and aldermen. And then the final step is the muralist actually painting the piece of art.
After preparing the walls, the muralists were ready to add some color to these communities. The first wall was in the small historic town of Tullahoma.
My name is Julie. I'm a Japanese-American painter and muralist. I was born in Tokyo, and currently I live in Oklahoma City. Some of my inspirations for painting were back when I first started getting back into fine art, because I had gone to school for graphic design and I was working as a designer. But I really missed fine art, but had kind of gotten away from it and couldn't think about how to get back into it. I've traveled to paint several places in the US, and then overseas I've traveled to Israel to paint. Hopefully in the future I'll be able to paint in Japan, because I still haven't painted in my home country. Mural art is not as prevalent there as it is in the US, so it's slowly picking up. There's more and more festivals there, and I'd sure like to join one someday. It's very cool to be part of the First Walls for Women. I'm always very honored that anyone would ask me to be in any festival, so I'm just extremely grateful. The mural I'm painting here in Tullahoma is inspired again by Japanese culture. It's inspired by kabuki, which is our traditional theater we have in Japan. The character is called Fujimusume, or the Wisteria Maiden. And in this play, it doesn't have a storyline, but it's just a very beautiful dance that the maiden does. It's a very ancient art that's still pretty much performed the same way as it was 400 years ago, which is amazing. I was able to attend my first kabuki play in January, and it was very exciting to sit so close to the stage. So ever since then, I've been very interested in learning more about kabuki, learning more about the storyline. Another reason that I chose the Wisteria Maiden is that in Japanese, flowers all have a meaning. And some of the meanings for wisteria are steadfast. And that's how Japanese deal with problems. We don't really throw a fit, or we don't vocalize our concerns so much. We usually wait it out. So steadfastness is a great quality, I think, that was shown here. And the other meaning of wisteria is welcome, which I think is even more than I thought. People are so very welcoming here. So I'm very happy that those are the meanings for that flower. I thought it was a wonderful message just of beauty and serenity and peace to bring to this community.
After a successful kickoff in Tullahoma, Walls for Women was officially underway. Meanwhile, the next mural was started just down the road in the nursery capital of the world, McMinnville.
I'm Jenny Eustick. I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'm a muralist, but I'm also a professor of art. And so I teach this and practice in the community as much as I can. As long as I can remember, I knew that I was destined to be an artist. Always was drawing, always was sort of making a record of things. And then I realized very early on that people responded to it and that it was a gift. So I also have a studio practice, which is typical of many artists, making things indoors, meant to be situated in galleries, museums. But there's something really special about making work that lives outside. It is a privilege to be able to do so. It's about kind of taking up space, being given a platform to make an expression and to start a conversation with the community. It's also for everyone. You make a piece of art that is accessible to anyone who can pass by it and see it, rather than maybe feeling reluctant to enter a museum or a gallery, feeling that that space isn't for them. So this literally is a gift to everyone. My artwork is really versatile, meaning that it responds to any number of contexts, especially community-based murals, where the desire is to sort of capture an identity or a value or some facet of history. And so what I wanted to do was delve into the history of McMinnville as much as I could, trying to find examples where women made contributions to the community that are still important today. And I found plenty here. A few of the most significant to mention and that are really dictating what's happening in the design are the Hebe statue. It symbolizes this incredible partnership between Mary Cunningham and Laura Worley, who made the library possible. Starting out from solving a problem of where can the women and children of the town go while the men are, doing business. And these women were really instrumental in that, and I was very impressed. And so the statue perfectly encapsulates all of that. There's a passage of geometric forms that are inspired by the saltpeter that was mined in the caverns. And I love the duality of, thinking about the usefulness of that as an element, that it was used in gunpowder in the Civil War, but also fertilizer that makes all of the industry possible or more fruitful. Moving further to the right, we have Tennessee purple coneflower or echinacea, something that was important to the Native American tribes that populated this area, and is a symbol of healing and renewal, just as Hebe is sort of the embodiment of that too. She is sort of projecting out her healing and renewing thoughts to the community, taking consideration of the past and really looking forward and thinking about prosperity, productivity, and well-being.
Moving over to East Tennessee, the next mural lies in the Tennessee Valley, Knoxville.
My name is Paris Woodhull, and I am an illustrator here in Knoxville, Tennessee. Yeah. Pretty much from age 6, I was proclaiming to my parents that I was going to be an artist when I grew up. I was never told growing up that I wouldn't be able to make a living with art. It was always assumed that if I worked hard enough, I would definitely be able to make a living. So I feel like that's definitely a different narrative than what most people get told when they go to art school. So I'm pretty much doing exactly what I wanted to do always. This is actually kind of a deviation from what I normally do. So a lot of my work is map-based, and especially the client work, map-based and branding. Krista and Scott asked me what I wanted to create, and so I really wanted to take a risk. All last year, I was kind of getting burned out on client work, so I started waking up early and drawing for myself for about an hour, 2 hours each morning. And so the entire design, all of the figures are coming from sketches in probably a stack of 14 sketchbooks. So there's no storyline or plot. It was just a chance for me to do something completely different. I would love to do more murals, and that's definitely part of why I took the job, is because I really wanted to learn by doing. For me, it was an opportunity to diversify my portfolio diversify it also in the sense of like the style that I offer, not just maps or branding or other things. Like I really want people to see that I have other things inside of me as well. I mean, for me, it's to the point where it's like, I am so excited to be doing this design that I don't think I would actually care if people hated it. Like I always say, no reaction is the worst reaction. I just want people to come up and like feel something. Like I've had a few families and they'll just pull up in their car and watch me paint in the evening. And so it's fun to see people's reaction to the wall as well. So I know after this, I'm gonna be sad. I'm like gonna have a little bit of like postpartum depression. But no, I'm really honored, so yeah.
As Paris was finishing up her mural in Knoxville, another wall was being painted just south of her in the serene town of Maryville.
My name is Nicole Salgar, and I'm a visual artist, but I also paint murals. I've always been into the arts since I was really young. I was always interested, and I thought that it really helped me express myself in a positive way. And I started getting into murals because I wanted to connect with the public in a big way. And I saw what a positive impact it had on communities. So I think that that is really the number one reason why I do this now. Most of the time when I'm creating something, I don't always have 100% in mind like what it's gonna mean. Everywhere I go or anywhere that I paint, I get inspired by the place, the people, the surroundings, the environment. So it's really like a combination of things. I've been playing with different color palettes lately, and while doing research of the area, I just found colors in the sunsets and in the mountains and colors of the flowers and just colors like around, you know. That's usually how I choose my color palette. Colors that you see in the area. In doing research and getting all these like ideas and stuff, I really wanted to incorporate the Smoky Mountains. So I wanted to give off this kind of very peaceful feeling. I always incorporate portraits into my pieces. The girl in the image is a friend from back home. I'd have to say, when I was designing it as well, I kind of wanted to embody their essence in a sense, you know, their energy, like their vibe. To me, it represents certain things, and then to the viewer, it represents others. I mean, it's kind of there to make people think, too, a little bit of like what it can mean to see those images, you know? It tells a story, and they can kind of choose which way they want it to go.
Last but not least, the final mural is being painted as a collaboration in Tennessee's capital city, Nashville.
I am Simone Wilder. I'm a graphic designer and lettering artist based in Nashville, Tennessee. I am a designer just because I love that work. I'm super fortunate to get to do what I love for a living and make a little extra cash while I do it. My art represents the things that I'm passionate about. So sometimes that's music, a specific lyric in a song or something like that. I'm a jazz dork, so I get a lot of inspiration from that. And then a lot of inspiration comes from Reed Miles, who is kind of the father of the Blue Note look. From a pretty young age, that was something that inspired me to get into design in the first place. I try to find inspiration just in communicating with other people and you know, seeing the heart from people, and then other times it comes from some of the experiences I'm going through. So right now there's kind of this reawakening to some racial frustrations that our country is going through, and so a lot of my art right now kind of echoes that fight and some of those passions.
My name is Sarah Painter. I'm a muralist and a full-time artist. I freelance, and in addition to murals, I have a studio practice as well. Well, I always grew up pretty creative. I got into painting more so because I wanted to go larger scale. I liked being out and about and doing public art, so paint is kind of the natural avenue for that. My work tends to be very site-specific, so it depends on where I'm painting, the people that live there, the history of what's taken place there, and what's happening in today's age. So I would say it's constantly changing. It's always commentary on the world around me or the world around the piece itself. And that really helps prompt what I do.
We're painting this mural for Walls for Women, specifically, and it's to celebrate the centennial of women's suffrage.
You know, we were prompted initially, the whole Walls for Women project is about the centennial for women's suffrage. So we used that as a springboard. We zoomed out and wanted to talk about the idea of women's rights as a whole and what the women's suffrage movement started. So we wanted to tie that whole concept into where we are today. How can we move forward?
You know, 100 years ago, women were able to vote, but not all women were able to vote. You know, there were still several groups of women who were not able to vote at that point, specifically Black women. Our wall is kind of an opportunity to highlight that specific thought.
You live within a patriarchal system, and women were divided for a number of reasons. And then also within that, there was a racial divide too. A lot of times white women didn't want to include Black women in this fight. So they're divided amongst themselves, and at the end of the day, it's like they're all fighting this fight.
So the quote that's on the wall is, "They buried us, but they didn't know we were seeds." I was trying to kind of go for this idea that the world is going to really pile it on. You can't get through life easily, and I don't think life is designed that way. You'll go through a lot of hardships, and it's not supposed to be easy, but it's how you come back from being buried and being faced with different adversity, how you come back from that and how you rise from the ashes, for lack of a less cheesy term, is super important. And I think that's something that in one way or another we all have to do, and we will all do in one way.
My name is John Sellers. I'm the co-owner of Martin's Coffee and Bakery in historic downtown Martin, Tennessee. Our mission at Martin's Coffee and Bakery is to build a self-sustaining funding model that makes long-term impact in Nepal. We do that by donating a portion of every single thing sold to building libraries in Nepal. And I'm happy to say that out of our first year of operating, we sold 50,000 cups of coffee, which built our first small library in Nepal. We bought this building about 3 years ago. It was originally gonna be a design studio that we have for our marketing business, but my wife saw it and she says, no, this is gonna be a coffee house. Long story short, everything sort of interconnected with our humanitarian mission to build long-term impact in Nepal with selling cups of coffee. We really wanted to have a space inside of our community that was neutral, where people could get together, have coffee, talk about impact, and then put some action to that. And a coffee shop fits that very, very well. We were really happy to sit down with Christian and Scott and then for them to express how they wanted to bring Walls for Women to Martin, Tennessee, even specifically on our building. It really overlapped with what we believe in and the motives of which both, I believe, organizations are run by. We knew, having past experiences in a historic downtown, that there would be a possibility of having some issues. So when we were approached by Christian and Scott for this project, we decided to not just paint it on our building, as we can, because it's private property that we have, but to go through all of the hoops with filing a COA, approaching the board, pleading our case, and asking for permission to have this pro bono mural installed on our property. We knew that there was a potential problem that was going to happen. We actually wanted to go through all of this process, go through the due process of being very transparent and open with the board, in that it is something that we want to work together on and we do not want to divide. We clearly laid out that what this movement was about, how we were selected, that it was pro bono, and that this is a big deal. Like, to say it in a crude way. It's a very big deal. That was met with one of the lead people that I was having a little bit of an issue with, suggesting that we donate the mural to somebody else.
So would you entertain the idea of donating this grant to somebody who is in an approved area?
They had no rules on murals being installed in historic downtown, yet there is over 10 murals just right next to us. They're all over. That was recorded on a Zoom meeting. That was put on social media. And for the first time, really, it was not an echo chamber when I was talking about like corruption and bias in small towns. Obviously there is, it's everywhere. But for the first time, people really saw that. And it was a recorded Zoom meeting. And they saw not only just suggesting it 3 times, but many other things of the bias that came out. And so people were familiar with the battle, but they couldn't like see it like firsthand. And this just caused, on another level, this humongous reaction.
Ridiculous. I applaud you and support you. Welcome to the United Communist States of America. I'm about sick of the BS. Just plain stupid. There's no politics any dirtier than small town politics. They need to get a life. Shaking my head.
After that meeting, it was a split vote. They said we need more time to draw up rules for this issue.
In the guidelines that you have in front of you, there is restrictions upon the architectural changes to the property. Furthermore, there is no rules in Tennessee that restricts artistic expression.
In that gap time, the economic developer of this area formed a pretty little book that was full of all the bad reasons why Martin should not have a mural, and proposed that they should be banned. They then accepted the recommendation for the ban, and then said, because we've accepted the recommendation for the ban, you are denied this mural. There's no way around it. It can't be classified as a sign. There's nothing we can do. We were devastated about that. You know, we want to be a part of history. We want to be a part of this movement. I see zero downside to focusing on a movement that celebrates the centennial of women's suffrage and a creative expression that focuses on women muralists. You're not going to go wrong with that. And that's why this movement is so powerful. And it's amazing to see the rejection of that. I don't understand it.
Historic zoning commissions are supposed to preserve the history of a town. So it's a lot of stoking egos in these small towns, because these historic zoning commissions a lot of times are on huge power trips.
The language that they craft is they bend it however they want to. And when you use language with, we want to maintain the historic integrity, when you have a 20,000 square foot brand new library that way of us, it really angered people.
What we run into is that there's no real clear vision for a lot of these historic zoning commissions. What comes into play there is, what do you just define as historical? Is it back in the, wagon wheel era? Is it when the railroad came through? They want to set up these regulations into place, but they've never really defined what it is that their town is known for, or how they would define historic. If you think back to, ancient times, art was something that in Mesopotamia and all these other ancient cultures, people were using to document history. I mean, you see these cave drawings or these petroglyphs. So to say that art can't be considered historical is just false. This historic zoning commissions have been the thorn in our side for everything we've tried to do.
I hate these people, man. Oh my God, to take that away from a town during this time, read the freaking room. Golly.
The ban of all murals in Martin was really a letdown for Walls for Women. But it wasn't the only roadblock that stood in the way.
Breaking news tonight, the coronavirus outbreak declared a global pandemic.
A deadly and contagious virus from China has made its way into the U.S.
As we know, this virus is rapidly spreading across the country.
The pandemic has really brought a lot of interesting questions to light, and that is why we don't value arts as essential.
There's a stigma against art as a job. Like, I faced it when I wanted to switch my major to be an art major, and I had so many people ask, well, what are you gonna do? You can't make a job out of an artist, but you can, there's value in it. And shaping a community, and it has therapeutic elements to it.
Some people don't think it's important, or they don't see it as a job. Some people are like, oh, is that a real job? I'm like, yeah, it's a real job.
The World Health Organization says the risk of the virus expanding worldwide is now classified as very high.
The CDC says tonight this situation is evolving rapidly. They do expect to see more cases in the coming days.
We expect to see the number of cases, the number of deaths, and the number of affected countries climb even higher.
It is likely that we will continue to see more cases in the United States in the coming days and weeks, including some limited person-to-person transmission.
The virus has been spreading for days to weeks.
When we all got locked down, what's the first thing you turn to distract yourself from being stuck in a room?
Started asking for book recommendations, music recommendations, podcasts, movies, TV shows, all forms of art. So why is it that we're so quick to cut the arts when we go and we reevaluate our budgets? And I will never understand that.
But you think about like a mural like this, it's bringing more attention to the side of the building, and hopefully it brings more business inside of here.
They improve a community through just straight up aesthetics by altering their environment, but they also drive economic growth, tourism, just interest, attention.
Amidst the sea of trauma that we're all going through right now, and still will be going through for a number of years, I think, we can splash some color and some fun and some thought onto a building that somebody can just hop in their car or walk down the street or see it out of the window.
We want to remind our viewers, health officials stress that 80% of coronavirus cases are deemed mild.
This is certainly not a moment for panic or high anxiety. It is a moment for vigilance.
The virus is still out there. It's still very contagious.
But you need to prepare for and assume that this is going to be a real serious problem.
I mean, we could have never known when we started Walls for Women that we were going to be doing this festival in the height of a pandemic, but I think it's so important that we continue that conversation of why we're still having this festival despite the pandemic. I mean, it's great that painting is a socially distanced activity, right? So we never for a second thought about canceling it.
In a time when the world wasn't quite sure what the next day would hold, art was there to save us. And it really was essential.
Art is what it means to be a human being and alive in this universe. It is what separates us from almost everything else, from everything else, is the ability for us as a human brain to be creative.
Art is what we turn to when we need a pick-me-up, when we need a distraction from reality, when we just need a mood booster. Art in general has so many proven effects to improve, emotional and mental well-being.
It's how we can, as human beings, cope with difficulties and to express ourselves as individuals, as this little flame burning by itself that's different than everything else out there.
I've seen so many people comment online that just being able to see some of these works of art on a day-to-day basis has just lifted their mood and started their day on a positive note, as opposed to, oh gosh, this is 2020, what possibly could happen today?
Literally everything you look at was done by an artist. There is not a single thing that exists in this world that didn't have an artist at some point creatively shaping and crafting it. I mean, every curve of the road, every stitch of your clothes. every single moment, every single conversation, every single thing that you do is a piece of art.
Some of these murals are almost like a time capsule. I mean, you can look at a piece of art like when it was painted and know what an artist was feeling or what they were experiencing then. And so a lot of this art is really these artists like saying, hey, we want to be appreciated and valued just as our male counterparts are.
It is how we are able to express ourselves and communicate with others that we may never meet or know.
They were already a message of hope pre-pandemic, but I think now it's a way to get people's mind off of everything that's happening. And we're not saying you shouldn't be paying attention to what's happening in the news, but I mean, all we're hearing right now is negativity.
That ties into the reason we were doing it in the first place, which just so happens that we're doing it amidst like pretty dark days. We all know this inside, that art is fundamental to us as human beings, and we need it, just like we need a hug or like we need food. It's a recognition of us as shouting out into the night that we are here and we like it here and it's cool and we're having fun. We just can't live in a world that doesn't have some sort of creative expression in it.
Art can seem kind of like a frivolous thing in the face of such seriousness and tragedy, but I can tell you that there's been a really incredible sense of togetherness and warmth and pride that I've witnessed and participated in talking to people working on this mural. I have a lot of hope in humanity, and I think we're going to be okay. We just have to really think about each other and be humble. Yeah.
As the murals were being completed, it seemed as if Walls for Women was coming to an end. But we're not done just yet. After fighting long battles with other towns over the concept of public art, 2 other muralists were finally added to complete the festival. The next stop is in the heart of the naturally beautiful Hickman County, Centerville.
My name is Whitney Harrington, and I am an art teacher, an artist, illustrator, muralist, mom, wife, all of those things. I like to do art that is fun and bright and a little whimsical, just something that is going to make people happy.
Her mural is just going to be the first piece of public art in Hickman County. They've run into a lot of roadblocks trying to get public art in the last few years. But then once we kind of incorporated the community, I reached out to the newspaper editor, and suddenly it just became this town project to find us a wall.
The mural that I did in Centerville is an ode to my Volkswagen. I have a 1974 Super Beetle. Her name is Alice.
She's doing a really cool vintage retro 70s themed mural. She's just like a lover of vintage 70s kind of motifs.
When Scott and Kristen told me that they wanted me to be an artist and they said I could do anything, I just thought, what would be better than doing my car, because that was one of the first big purchases that I've made doing art. So I feel like that represents me and what I do and what I love. It may not be a woman, it may not say an amazing quote on it, but it does represent a woman artist and me totally.
While Whitney was working on her mural in Centerville, another muralist was just beginning hers in the relaxing, southern-esque town of Nolensville.
My name is Kim Radford, and I'm a full-time muralist in Nashville, Tennessee. My goal and my top interest is public art, because when there's a universe of options, I'm a little overwhelmed. This was the first mural that I've ever been hired to do that the goal was that it would be really hands-off, meaning the design was my choice.
She's doing a female empowerment quote and kind of a floral design. That's going to be really bright and exciting.
I painted a first mural commemorating the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment in Huntsville earlier. So I saw this piece as a sister mural, and they're both titled the same thing, This Girl Can. I wanted this one to really be a backdrop to celebrate anything from sports to celebrate any type of milestone. In a lot of ways, it pulled elements from everything I'd painted over the year, and I'm a better painter. I'm a better painter now than I was in January because of how many walls I've gotten to paint. From my perspective, I nailed what I wanted to do, so yes, I was very happy.
These final 2 murals wrapped up Walls for Women for the summer, but the emphasis on women in art continues.
I think that Walls for Women has brought opportunities to us by just Kristen and Scott's willingness to go across the state and find all of these places where, art can have a huge impact on their community.
The nice thing about the Walls for Women project, from my personal point of view, is that it's giving women artists a chance to be showcased. It's giving them the freedom to do whatever they want to. It's celebrating the fact that they're women, not apologizing for being women.
I mean, hopefully it's viewed as just like a springboard, I don't think this is a say-all, end-all. This isn't the answer. It's not like, all right, like women are equal now, like this is it. It's like, no, this is just like one step. So hopefully it's looked at as just kind of part of the process, and we're leaps and bounds further ahead than where we are now, and the fight for equality and equity.
I think initiatives like Walls for Women and other female mural festivals will really be an encouragement to perhaps younger female artists who are thinking that maybe it's something they can't do, but when they see that it is being done and that women are making these huge pieces, I think it's a big encouragement and a boost to see that.
I think there's girls and young women looking at us. I know it because I see it in my Instagram. I get messages from them like, how do I do this? How to become a muralist.
I had a little girl come out yesterday and she wanted to get up on the lift and paint. I'm like, she probably hasn't seen women doing this kind of thing. And to see it from such a young age, hopefully it will empower future generations as well.
I feel lucky to be young and female so that I can show people that you can be young and female and be an artist.
They want to do it. They're watching, and it won't surprise me that there will be a lot more women that take it on.
It's empowering more and more young women to get into it.
I think Walls for Women will be remembered as something that was a positive movement, that hopefully in the future other things like it has happened. I feel like so many other people are starting to see the effect of these murals in these towns, and they are going to want to get involved.
I think that a lot of people are going to take note of this project because, there's a lot of really amazing creatives that are part of it. But also the fact that they're celebrating something so important like the 19th Amendment.
2020 is an extraordinary year, and it would be so easy to just focus on the tremendous challenges that we're all facing right now. But it's so important to just make an effort and take time to honor important milestones like this. To say, yes, I know that it's been 100 years, but it was hard fought, and it's not anything that we can take for granted even 100 years later.
And now 100 years later, women can do anything, not just murals, but they can be sculptors, they can be architects, you name it.
Women are half of the population in this world, and so we are half of the people who can create beautiful and incredible art.
I hope Walls for Women brings about the fact that we don't need to just have a centennial year to hire women. It was to honor the centennial year, but I don't think we need to just have one certain year where we honor women. I think there needs to be a time in our future where women are getting priority treatment when it comes to walls to begin with. But until that happens, we as an organization will prioritize the hiring of women.
Well, right now, there's this program called Walls for Women, and I hope one day there doesn't need to be a program called that, because there are no barriers for women, and that is just automatically equal, because there's no program called Walls for Men because men already paint all the walls. So I hope one day it gets to that point for women too.
Although the actual festival may be over, the impact that Walls for Women has brought to these communities will transcend time.
I feel like art transports you to a different world, especially if you stumble upon it in your city and you never knew it was there. It's a bit of a door to freedom, I think.
All murals are really is a coat of paint, and that's all it takes to alter an environment. I mean, you've seen how all these towns where we've done murals have been completely activated by the installation of one single coat of paint. It can be seen as a political statement, it can be seen as, oh, we're rabble-rousers coming in trying to change the town, but really it's just paint. All we're trying to do is give a platform for people to express themselves, and I want others to not be so fearful of change when they see someone painting a building, because at the end of the day, it's just paint. I just would like people to be a little bit more open-minded when they see visual art, and their visceral reaction not to be someone's trying to destroy this historic core of a town, but rather we're adding to it, we're altering the environment, and we're creating positive change with just a coat of paint.